Sandy says read, and welcome to the channel. Today, you guys, we're going to do a review and discussion of the Pit Dragon Trilogy by Jane Yolen. Before we begin, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. That housekeeping includes a big old welcome for you guys to subscribe. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, I invite you to do so, and I invite you to ask your friends to subscribe to the channel too, because it's free and we do fun stuff here. We talk about books, we talk about booktube tags and bookish stuff. It's usually random and crazy. You never know what entertaining thing is going to happen. So subscribe. Welcome. Also, one of the fun things that's kind of new here is we play bingo. Yes, I have put together a huge old list of phrases and words and stuff that I tend to say a few times here on this channel. I put it into a bingo playlist. So I will put a link to the Bingo Baker website in the drop-down box below, and it will take you directly to your own little spot where you can generate your own bingo card of the words that I typically say here on this channel. That way you can check them off and play bingo while you watch these fabulous reviews and discussions. Heighten your enjoyment of the review and discussions happening here at Sandy Says Read. All right, what else? Merch. Yes. Okay, guys, I do have a merch shop over at the Spreadshirt shop platform. You can get shirts like this, like the Team Malachi shirt. And there's one, Practice Kindness. There's one about I'm not listening, I'm reading. There's a bunch of things. Check it out. See if there's something there that you like, that you would like to have for yourself or a gift for a friend, etc. I'll put that link in the drop-down box below. And now all of the housekeeping and commercial type stuff is done. It's over. We're going to dive into, oh no, I got to tell you about working in the yard. I'm going to give you guys timestamps so you can skip all this crap if you want to. I worked in the yard this morning. So if I look like I'm bedraggled, if I'm talking, randomly and slowly, more randomly than usual, it's because I'm exhausted and I'm distracted. I'm distracted by the fact that something's happening with my arm. I only worked in the yard for like 2.5 hours, right? But the very first thing I did when I got out there was get into a mess of these weeds that I think I'm allergic to. Yay, right? Something in my yard that I can't be around. And it got on my arm, like above my gardening gloves. And it just feels like someone is repeatedly pulling a Band-Aid off of my arm. Yeah, that's a little bit distracting. So after this, I might run up to the store and get some calamine lotion. I looked, I don't have any in my house because I am not prepared for gardening season to start. There we go. Shall we begin? Whatever timestamp this is, let's begin the review and discussion of the Pit Dragon Trilogy. Glare, right? Oh, that's not too bad of a glare. Look at that. All right. The Pit Dragon Trilogy by Jane Yolen. And let me give you the specs. The specs are... What do we got here? Okay, this particular version is from the Science Fiction Book Club. It was published by arrangement with Harcourt, Brace and Company in 1998. The 3 books that are in this edition were published in 92, 94, and 97. Hold, please, and I can tell you for sure. I need to tell you the names of these things anyway. Okay, here we go. Dragon's Blood was first published in 90. Oh, you guys. You know I can't do numbers, right? I can never do numbers. Dragon's Blood was first published in 1982. And in this book, it goes from pages 1 to 143. Heart's Blood was first published in 1984, and it goes from pages 145 to 323. Then Ascending of Dragons was first published in 1987, and it goes from pages 325 to 470. And then this, did I say this one right? Even, let's see, this particular edition was published in September 1998. Maybe that's why I was saying 90s, right? Who knows? I can't do numbers, you guys. It is a thing. Okay, I'm going to read for you the cover flap because there's nothing on the back cover except this fancy dragon. So I'm going to read you the cover flap. Ostar 4 doesn't have a lot going for it. A metal-poor desert planet in a far-off system, it was originally used by Earth as a dumping ground for convicts. Yet, while its plant and animal life are limited, Ostar does have one notable feature: its dragons. Warm-blooded, light-boned creatures, Ostarian dragons can fly and survive the killing cold of the desert nights. Nearly extinct when the convicts arrived, they were brought back by careful breeding and are now raised for meat and leather. But they're valued mostly as fighting beasts in the gaming pits. On Ostar, gambling on the dragon fights is a major industry, so the beasts must be bred and properly trained on ranches such as Master Sarkon's. 15-year-old Jackin Stewart, a bondservant, works in Sarkon's barns, dreaming of the day when he can steal a hatchling to secretly train as a fighter. It is his only hope of earning his freedom. His chance comes when an error lists 9, not 10, new hatchlings. Stealing the 10th away, Jackin raises it, and over the seasons, telepathically bonds with his ward. But what if he's caught? Or worse, what if he doesn't know enough to train his dragon to become a true champion? Okay, now is that all the specs I was supposed to talk to you about? I think so. We got that all done. Okay, so I picked this up off of my shelf for the Dragon Book Reading Challenge for the Year of the Dragon here in 2024. I have had this on the shelf for years. You guys, it's been on the shelf for years. I think I picked this up at like a Barnes and Noble clearance table because look at this dragon. Is there a glare? Yeah. Okay. Look at this dragon. Isn't this great? I mean, I saw this and went, ooh, right? That's just seems like something I would do, right? Go, oh yeah, and grabbed it. And then I thought the Pit Dragon Trilogy meant that this was the first book in the Pit Dragon Trilogy. And I think I mentioned this in the Dragon Book Reading Challenge introduction in that video that I filmed a little while back. I think I mentioned this to you guys, that I was under the impression this was book 1 in that trilogy. Therefore, I hadn't opened it. I hadn't dived into it. I was wanting to get books 2 and 3 so that I would have all 3 of them and I could read all 3 of them in a row. You guys, all 3 of them are in this edition. I had all 3 of them all along. We can blame that on the number thing, right? Or I'm just a moron. Either way, okay, so here, all 3 books are in here. I have read them now for the Dragon Reading Challenge of 2024, and I'm ready to talk to you guys about them. I enjoyed the stories. I had some problems with Jackin Stewart. Like sometimes I was like, go Jackin, you do it, get this taken care of. And other times I was like, dude, I want to reach into this book and smack you upside the head. You know, I was just frustrated with him. And other times I was just happy as could be. I absolutely loved the dragons in this world. Jane Yolen has built it's a science fiction fantasy world with awesome dragons. The concept of these dragons being used is intriguing, and the parallel between the bond servants and the dragon servants is interesting to me. And we'll talk about that, unless my brain gives out and I forget. We'll talk about that a little bit too. So I am probably going to be giving away spoilers right and left throughout. If you don't want any spoilers, then now is probably a good time to click away from this video, check out one of my other videos here on the channel, come back to this one after you've read these books. If you can find them on, eBay, or this might be on Amazon. I'll put a link in the drop-down box below just in case this is available on Amazon still. I mean, with it being, I don't know, to being a hot minute since it was published. Who knows? But I mean, I can recommend the stories. I can recommend these dragons, but I'm probably going to give away just a ton of spoilers. In fact, I know that I am because I can't help, especially from book one. I know I'm going to be giving away a lot of spoilers, and there's a pretty big thing that happens in the second. I mean, in the second story, there's a big thing that happens that must be discussed. It must, in order to understand what's happening in the third book. So I'm going to talk about these things. I'm going to talk about these things. So here we go. Okay. Let's start with the characters. Or I should start with synopsis, right? You guys, I'm all over the place. Let us begin with a synopsis of Dragon's Blood. The synopsis of Dragon's Blood is what we just read from the cover flap. That is what happens in the first book. Jack and Stewart does sneak into the nursery where he works. He does steal a hatchling because it's written down on the log sheet that there are 9 hatchlings when really there are 10. So he picks out one that he thinks will be great as a dragon to train. He steals this little dragon. He takes it off to this oasis where he thinks no one will notice him training something. Okay, so there are 2 types of weeds or flowering plants that grow on this planet, and Jaqen has those growing in abundance around this oasis, so he can feed his dragon and train her up. So that's what he's planning to do, and he does it. He manages to do this. He pulls this off, and he bonds with this dragon. He names her Heart's Blood, and it's a wonderful story. I love that. Okay. Of course, there's more going on than just that in the first book. Okay. There's more than just him training this dragon. He is injured at one point, and the gal who works as a nurse or as a doctor there at the nursery, she becomes a love interest. Okay. I mean, they're not falling for each other in the first book, but you can tell that's what's coming up in the second and the third book. Of course. Okay. But, and her name is Aki. Jaqen and Aki, they start to, they definitely form a friendship in the first book. Okay. And she acts as a, I don't want to say a mule, but she acts as someone who can get things for Jaqen. Like, he gives her gold. She goes and buys seeds so that he can plant more of the food that the dragon needs. Right. Okay. Things like that. Okay, so that's our synopsis. The cover flap gave us our good synopsis for the first book. Now, the second book, Heart's Blood, this one is named after our dragon. The second book is, and our dragon goes to Jaqen and Aki, take Heart's Blood to the city called the Rock, and there is where the major pits are, and Heart's Blood is able to fight in the pits with the other dragons, and she does very well, and she is a champion, and she wins gold for her owner, for Jaqen, and he is able to get enough gold to buy himself out of bond servitude, and we'll talk about that as we go through these. Okay, so he's able to buy himself out of servitude. He can do that. He is a master at this point. But there's more going on in the second book with the political aspects of the planet. The Federation is involved. The rebels don't like the Federation. The rebels don't like the master and servant relationship that take place on this planet. The rebels don't like the dragons on this planet. The rebels would like to disrupt things and change the political nature on the planet, on Ostar. Okay. And they try to, and they try to manipulate Jaqen to assist them. He doesn't want to assist them. He just wants to train dragons. He just wants to raise more dragons. He just wants to be part of the dragon society. He just wants to keep doing that. That's what he wants to do. And these people keep messing with him and trying to interrupt that, right? Well, at some point in the second book, the rebel faction, this cell that he has to be affiliated with for a short while, they manipulate him to take a suitcase into the major pit there in the Rock. and he leaves it there as he is supposed to do, and it while he and Aki are going back home to the nursery, it explodes and it blows up, and it's terrible. I mean, dragons die, people die. It's awful. We don't see that carnage because we're in Jaqen's point of view, and he's going back to the nursery. But now the wardens and the rebels are trying to track him down. They think that Jaqen and Aki did this on purpose. They think Jaqen and Aki planted that bomb in that suitcase. And so Jaqen and Aki have to go on the run. And that's kind of where we leave the second book, is with them on the run. But while they're on the run, Heart's Blood, the dragon, is with them, and she's protecting them, and she gives her life protecting them. And it is sad. It is awful. It pissed me off. I was angry. I was mad about it. I understand why she had to give her life. I understand the buildup to it made sense. I mean, she was injured in a fight, and then she was injured, during the protecting of them as they were running. She was exhausted. I mean, the buildup to it worked, but dang it, when she died, I was pissed. I was mad. Her death was too quick. And I don't mean that as in she should have languished and suffered. I mean, her death was too quick on the page. It was like poof, and she was falling over and she was dead. And I'm like, wait, what just happened? I mean, it made me mad. It made me mad. But I understand why it had to happen, because when she died and the wardens left and the rebels, the bad guys left Heart's Blood in a lump on top of Jaqen and Aki, thinking that Jaqen and Aki would now die too. But rather than die, they ripped her open like a tauntaun. They ripped her open and they got inside of her to survive the cold of after dark, which is something that happens every single night on this desert planet. And they survived inside of her, but inside of her, in the egg chamber where the eggs germinate, right, where in her, they changed. They were born again, and they received dragon sight and this ability to telepathically communicate the way the dragons do. And so when they came out of her in the morning, they were renewed and they were different. They were born again, and they had this dragon ability, and it was amazing. And I understand that had to happen for the plot. I understand that they needed that ability and that knowledge for book 3, but oh my God, I hated it. I hated it. Right. All right. So synopsis of book 3 then is Ascending of Dragons. And in this story, we're away from the rebels again. We're away from that political stuff again. We got away from it, and we're out in the wild. We're up in the mountains, and we're getting away from the wardens and the rebels, and they're running. So Aki and Jaqen are running away. Heart's Blood is dead now, but her hatchlings that were back at the nursery get away and come to them. So, Jaqen had bonded with the hatchlings. So now there are 5 of them, and they come to Jaqen and Aki. And so these 7 are surviving in caves in the mountains. And Jaqen and Aki are training up these 5 hatchling dragons, not to be fighters in the pits, but to be fighters to survive. And I liked that. I liked that coming about and happening. But the rebels and the wardens might still be looking for Jaqen and Aki. They might not be convinced that they're dead, or so Jaqen fears. So each time that there's a helicopter, and they're just called copters in this world, each time that there's a copter that flies overhead or that circles the area, Jaqen and Aki rightfully freak out, and they hide a little deeper in the caves, and they decide we can't stay in these caves that are so close to the nursery, so close to civilization. We need to go further from civilization. And as they try to go further from civilization, they end up getting caught by these mountain dwellers, these folks that are ore workers, these folks who mine and work with ore in the mountain. And Jaqen and Aki are surprised by this, because this is not a metal-rich planet at all. So it's surprising that they find this. It's also surprising that there are dragon bones piled up inside this mountain, within these caves and this cavernous structure, there are piles of dragon bones. And Akin, Jaqen and Aki meet a dragon almost immediately when they get into this cavernous system. I mean, before they're taken captive, they meet this dragon and they name the dragon Oracle, like a heart oracle. They name her Oracle, and Jaqen is just convinced that she is somehow related to Heart's blood. He thinks she might be a cousin or something because of the way she looks and the way that she telepathically sends messages to him. He's able to speak with this dragon telepathically, and he thinks, he just believes in his soul that she's somehow related to Heart's blood. And so he feels a connection to her, and he wants to help her, and he wants to follow her. And when they do get taken captive by these ore workers, and he figures out that these ore workers also capture and use these dragons in the mountain, he wants to help Oracle and the other dragons. He would like to get them out of there if he could, when he gets himself out of there, when he gets Aki out of there, right? These ore workers in the mountains, they understand the transformation that took place with Jaqen and Aki. Now, they don't necessarily know that Jaqen and Aki went through that transformation when they slept, in Heart's blood. They don't necessarily know that happened, but they understand that sort of transformation can take place if they sleep within the chamber of a dragon. So what they do is they have these mother dragons, these hens, and they let them become impregnated. Once they lay their eggs, they let the dragon hatchlings hatch, and then they take the eggs that are not viable, get rid of those, and then they take the hen out to this like ceremonial bowl outdoors. They kill the hen, cut her open, and they take their own infants, their own children, and put their own children into the dragon so that their own children can get this telepathic ability. They do this. And then after the children sleep in there overnight, they eat the dragon. It's gory and gross and disgusting. I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. But that's the way these people treat and revere and worship the dragons and use them, right? And I didn't like it at all. Yeah. So Jaqen and Aki they want to save Oracle from that fate. I mean, they see this happen with one of the dragons. They want to save her from that fate. They want to save one of the hatchlings that they've discovered from that fate. They want to get they want to get out of there, obviously, get their freedom, and they want to help as many dragons as they can. So book 3, that's what's happening. We're getting away from these ore workers and getting out and making a happily ever after. We end up with one of the people from book 2 showing up at the end of book 3, surprise, and in a copter and saying, hey, all these things were resolved. All this stuff took place while you guys were out here in the wilderness, and everything is fine and great. And you can come back to the nursery as wards of the state, and I'll take care of you. And that's your synopsis. Okay, so let's dive in. And that's all the synopsis stuff. Let's dive in and talk about some of the characters and some of the plot points and some of the cool world building stuff that took place in the 3 books. Okay, because I did enjoy the stories. I did enjoy the world building. It had its moments when it felt very surface level to me. I mean, I wanted more in all 3 books. I wanted more, especially in book 2 when we went to the rock, when we went to the pit where the major fights would happen. I wanted more. I wanted to see more of it. I wanted to understand it better. I wanted to, like, as we were walking through the streets, I wanted to know more about it. And I didn't get more. But I don't think we needed more for the story. I think that was just, I wanted more. I wanted more world building. But you didn't have to have more to get it. Does that make sense? Like, Jane didn't need to give us a whole lot more of the rock. We didn't need to get a whole lot more of Federation politics. we didn't need to get all that to understand the basics of the story. We got the basics, and we got the basics of the story, and it made sense, and you could follow it, and it worked. It just wasn't, I guess it wasn't very deep is what I'm looking for. There wasn't a lot of depth. Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of depth, but it worked. I mean, I don't want you to think that we were missing stuff. We weren't missing anything. It just wasn't as rich as I would have liked. The dragons were. So we will continue to talk about the dragons. Okay, so let's talk about the characters a bit, especially Jack and Stuart. He's our main character. So let's talk about him. And I see I have page 14 listed here for you. All right. A lot of book one, especially, a lot of colloquialisms and sayings were centered around this concept of the bond bag that a lot of the characters wore around their neck. If you were one of the servants, if you were one of the bonded, then you wore a leather bag around your neck that you would put coins into. And when you got enough coins, when you got enough gold, you could buy your way out of bond. You could buy your way out of this indentured servitude that these characters were in. There were masters who had, a number of these bonded servants who worked under them or for them. And yeah, that's just the system that was set up on this planet. And Jack and, let's see. Okay, what am I doing? What am I telling you guys? On page 14 and 15, we learn a little bit more about Jackin from the conversation that's going on around him with a couple of the other Bond boys who are having breakfast. All right, let's see. I bet it's Bloody Flag and Blood Brother today. Those are two dragons. Said Slack, his mouth full of the juicy meat. It's that time again. Humits, I hate that brother. His is always the messiest stall, and besides, he loves to nip. I'll take him for you, said Jackin. The first cup of tack had restored his tongue and burned courage through his body. He never nips me. None of them ever nip you, said Erican pleasantly. You've got something, trainer blood, like your dad. I bet even old Sarkin himself doesn't have your touch. And see, through that conversation, we're seeing that Jackin has the ability to work with these dragons and to do it well. His father was training a feral dragon out in the wilds and was killed. And that's why Jackin and his mother had to go into this bonded servitude. They ran out of money. They ran out of living. They had to go and be bonded to someone. So let's see. Jackin looked down into his second cup of tack and stirred it slowly with a spoon. The deep red drink moved sluggishly. He knew that Erican was just being agreeable again, saying something to please, but it was something that Jackin felt too. Still, he didn't dare voice it aloud. Bragging, like regrets, filled no bag. And see, there's one of the phrases about filling your bag. So much in book one and even into book two, we were seeing them talk an awful lot about, filling your bag. That was, that colloquialism was happening throughout the books. And I like that. I mean, that helped pull you into the world and pull you into their thought processes. And I thought that was very clever of Jane to do. Let's see. Page 26. Oh yeah. Okay. So mostly we're in Jackin's point of view throughout all three of these books, right? On page 26, we have an example where it was weird. Like we're supposed to be in his point of view, but he's unconscious, right? This is where he gets injured. Lycarn, perhaps you would say his name, Lycarn. He is one of the bond servants. He's an older man, and he's a druggie, right? He smokes this weed, so he's called a weeder. And when he's smoking that weed, he becomes just angry. He's just filled with this fury, like a weed fury is what they call it. And he just gets angry and mean. So he's not a nice guy, right? And so he has come into the barn while Jackin and a couple of other of the Bond boys are there. And he's mad because they left a tool where they shouldn't have left it. He's angry about it. He's like raging about it. And it upsets one of the dragons who's out of his stall. And when a big old dragon is getting upset, things start going wrong and people get injured. Let's see. Blood Brother gave one last mighty pull, and his wing tore free, the hot blood dripping down onto the dust, burning the floorboards where it fell. 3 drops spattered onto Jackin's back, leaving deep pits. But he had been unconscious since the first blow and did not feel the burns. So quite a bit of this scene that we're seeing it from someone else. I guess the omniscient narrator is showing us this scene because Jackin is out. He's not there. But something I found interesting, I want to point out in here, is that Lycarn is being shown to us. We're seeing that character through this scene. We're seeing him come in here and just rage and be angry over the fact that a tool was left somewhere, right? And because he's angry about this tool being left somewhere, a dragon has gotten out of control. Jackin has gotten hurt and is unconscious, and a dragon is about to die. Let's see. Lycarn's hand on the regulator hesitated, then rammed it right onto kill. He fired once into the dragon's head, shattering the black eyes, and once more into the front of the neck, severing the sternum muscles and making a crimson flower burst and trickle down onto the dragon's breast. First, the mighty wings collapsed, helpless at the dragon's sides. Then slowly the great beast fell, shaking the floor of the barn. At his collapse, all the dragons in the stud barn set up a howling. Tears nowhere near as red as dragon's blood, but colored from blisterweed, ran slowly down Lycarn's cheeks in familiar grooves. "You gutless lizard," he hissed. "You piece of waste. Whine at me, will you? I bet everything I had on your third fight. You were going to be a champion. I was going to be a man once more. You ruined me." Lycarn dropped the gun and walked over and began kicking the dying beast in the side. And it continues on. He abuses this dying dragon. This is the dragon's name is Brother, and Brother, dead, gets sent to the stews. And we'll talk about the stews later, which is also a sad thing. But we see Lycarn when he's being abusive and angry and awful and killing a dragon who was merely reacting to rage and bad things happening around him, right? So we're seeing Lycarn in that light, and we see, let's see, this is page 26 and 27. On page 100, we're going to see him again. Let's see if I can get to it for you. Hold, please. Okay, page 100. Okay, when we talk about culling day, we see Lycarn again on culling day, and culling day is not fun at all. And so I'm going to read this for you. Only old Lycarn seemed to enjoy the culling. He preceded it every year with a night of blister fury. Joe Janik's swollen left eye and a bruise on Balak's cheek testified to Lycarn's blisterweed strength. It had taken 4 of them to put him to bed. In the morning, they all followed his orders sullenly. He was a weeder, but he knew dragons. His fingers pointed to one hatchling after another, sorting, hesitating only once at a well-spotted orange that was assigned, at last, to the beauty group. Jackin was secretly pleased that he had guessed all but that last correctly. His eye was as good as Lycarn's. He also knew that all over Austere 4, similar culling days were held. It was reasonable to select the best dragons for breeding. Once, so the books told him, the great Ostar dragons had been on the edge of extinction, and the first settlers had slowly brought them back. The encyclopedia had a whole article on the dragons. They used to fight one another to the death, and it had taken men to train them, retrain them really, to their old instincts of fighting only until dominance was assured. But that didn't make culling day any easier to bear. Jackin wondered briefly why the culling had to be so violent, why the hens and hatchlings had to be subjected to such a hard separation. But he knew that the only way to choose the hatchlings properly was to see them all together. And there was no practical way to quiet the cull's terror. Stunning the hatchlings would ruin the tender young meat for the stews and could disorder the beauty dragons completely. Besides, as Jackin knew full well, there were very few power cells for the extinguishers to be had. They were used sparingly, and only in life and death situations. So first few times that we see Lycern, we see him with these sad situations or with angry situations or with these desperate situations. We see him and we see him in a negative light. He's usually portrayed in a negative light in this first book. He's not a fun character. He's not a nice guy. He's usually weeded out of his mind, right? He's usually angry and abusive and kicking something around. He's usually bad. So when we get to, I think it's the end of the first, is the end of the first book? Hold, please. Let me see if I wrote it down. Yeah, okay. So when we get to page 284, and he has to do something, selfless. I'm kind of wondering, I don't know if I buy it or not, right? I'm kind of wondering if we should be trusting him. I'm wondering if he's doing this for the right reasons. I'm just wondering. See, at the end of toward the end of the second book, when the bomb has gone off at the rock, okay, at the pit fight, the bomb has gone off. The wardens and the rebels believe that Jaqen and Aki have set this thing off. The rebels forced Jaqen to leave it there, right? The wardens are looking for Jaqen and Aki to bring him in under, to arrest him. The rebels are looking for Jaqen and Aki because if they didn't die in the blast, then they could pin this on the rebels, right? So everyone's after Jaqen and Aki. And Lycern comes into this room where Jaqen and Aki and this Senator Golden are, having a conversation, a discussion about, you guys are wanted for, setting a bomb. He comes into this room and he tells them that he's going to basically sacrifice himself. And I don't know if I believed him. Where are we? Let's see. Jaqen ran over and pushed her aside. He pushes Aki aside. He stared at Lycern. I thought you'd given up weed, old man. Oh, I had, boy, Lycern said. But you see, I'm going to need my blister fury in a moment. Jaqen tensed then, and seeing the old man was not yet sunk into the comatose stage that preceded the angry rush of blister fury, put his hand out and pushed. Let us by. Surprisingly, Lycern smiled, a thin, wry smile, and stepped aside. I got your dragon out of the barn. She's off to the mountains north of Sucker's Marsh. If you follow her there, you'll be safe from the wardens for a while, if you can manage to live through dark after. There are folk out there, and dragons too. I know. I lived in the mountains nearly 5 years myself. There are caves, and berries, and mushrooms. He waved his hand vaguely toward the northwest. Golden was out the door in a moment. Aki went after him. Jaqen stared at Lycern but couldn't move. The old man's face was furrowed with tear lines, pocked with scores. It was an ugly, familiar face. Once Jaqen had thought it the face of an enemy. Remember, Lycern said suddenly, the best trick of all is surprise. Why? Because I don't believe a worm master like that Kalkov. You might be a miserable piece of lizard slime, but you'd never knowingly endanger a dragon. And because Sarkin, the red tears started piling up again. Because he filled my bag. And he loved you both. You and Aki. Remember that, boy. When you're out there in the cold and the dark is pressing in. Now go. I'll hold them off as long as I can. So Lycern is going to stay behind in this room and go into this blister fury from the weed he's been smoking and take out as many of the wardens as he can, right? And give Jaqen and Aki and Golden a chance to run as far as they can toward the mountains, toward Heartsblood, to get away. He's giving them a head start. And boy, I don't know if I believe him. I don't know if I trust him. I don't know. Eventually, yes, it proved that he was trustworthy in that moment. It was right to trust him. He did stay behind and go nuts on the wardens and people who came in. We don't see him do that because we're in Jaqen's point of view. We're with Jaqen running toward the mountains, right? We don't see what happens back there in that room. Now, at the end of book 3, when Golden shows up in that copter and basically spews what has happened, he says, Lycern held him off as long as he could. He was, like 2 broken legs, whatever, he had come to the hospital and we were in the hospital together, blah, 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 blah. So we know that Likern was true to his word in that moment. But it was just weird. It's like all of a sudden, yeah, he's going to stand up and defend. It was weird. It was weird. But there you go. Let's talk about other characters. We're still talking about characters. Let's talk about Golden, because we've just mentioned him in this room with Jaqen and Aki. Golden is a senator, and he's a politician, so I don't trust him. I don't trust him. I don't know whose side he's on. I don't know if he's on the Federation side, if he's on the rebel side. I came to the conclusion that he's on his own side. Okay, he's his own man doing his own thing, his own agenda. Whoever is going to help him at the moment is who he's going to side with. It's basically what that comes to. He does help Aki as much as he can. He does seem to be, I don't want to say loyal to her, but he uses anyone he can use. If you can do something for him, he will use you however he can, right? And so he has used Aki. He put her in a rebel cell to see if, she could get some information for him, if she could do some stuff for him, infiltrating those rebels, right? So he used her, but he did then try to extricate her from that cell when it got dangerous. Okay, so he did look out for her too. He wasn't all bad, right? But then he did show up at the end. I've got it here. Golden ex machina. He did show up at the very end. Just for some reason, at the end, Jaqen decided, hey, let's stop running from these copters. Let's just stand here and let it land, and let's talk to whoever steps out of it. And the person who stepped out of it was Golden. And they're like, hey, you're alive. Yeah, he was alive. And he basically told them, hey, here's everything that happened since you and I got separated, and come on back to the nursery now. You're not prisoners. You can be a ward of the state. Okay. Let's talk about Aki, because this chick was all over the place for me. Aki is a young lady who I think she's the same age as Jaqen. We learn on the cover flap that he's 15 years old. There was a point in the story where I thought someone mentioned being at the nursery for 20 years. But then another place in the story, someone mentioned 17 years. And I thought he was 17 years old. So throughout the story, I was thinking he was 17 years old. But he's, at least when we start, he's 15. And this story doesn't cover more than a few months. So he can't be more than 16, okay? And I think she is also 16. I think they're the same age. Even though she has more worldly knowledge than he does, even though she has more like medical training, even though she has more schooling, she's able to read, she has more, and she just has more worldly knowledge than he does. She seems older. She appears to me to be an older character. She has more wisdom. She's more mature. She thinks things through a little better than he does, right? But I think they're the same age. I get that impression at times. And then in the end, Golden makes a comment that, the two of them had done a lot of growing up for their age. And the way he says it gave me the impression they're the same age. So I think they are. Anyway, Aki, turns out she is the illegitimate daughter of Sarkhan. So he owns this nursery, and he discovers that he had a daughter. He brought her to the nursery. She doesn't want to be beholden to Sarkhan. She doesn't want to be beholden to any man. She wears a bag around her neck, even though she doesn't need to. She's not a bond servant. She's not bonded. She's a free person. But she wears the bag because she doesn't want anyone to know she's a free person. She wants to be able to move about society differently, and she wants to fill her own bag. Right? She wants to be independent. She wants to do her own thing. And yeah, that's the kind of chick she is. She wants to do her own thing. Yeah, she's, I don't know, she's a free spirit, I guess you would say. She gave me the impression that she was interested in Jaqen as a love interest, And then she would back off, and I got the impression that she was not interested at all, that she saw him as a child. And then she came back in book 2, and she was, well, she was in that rebel cell, right? She was infiltrating that cell. And when she got out of that cell, she was with Jaqen, helping Heart's Blood, and she was basically saying, look, I'm never going to leave you. I'm with you. I'm going to follow you. We're in the mountains together. We're on this journey together, and we're side by side. And I thought, well, that was abrupt. That was interesting. I found that to be odd and strange, but they became pals. I mean, they became more than just friends. This is a very clean story. There were no sexual scenes. There was nothing like that. The most you ever saw them do was hold hands, which I thought was lovely. Although, no, she did kiss him goodbye one time. But I mean, just lovely. Okay, very, very clean, very almost platonic most of the time. But you could see there was this budding love between the two of them. Okay, there you go. All right. So there, it says all the characters we need to talk about before we get to the dragons, because the dragon Heart's Blood was fun. She was precocious. She had a sense of humor. Even though she did not speak with words, she had actions that were just fun. And I really liked the dragon. And when Jane killed the dragon, I was mad. I was so upset. I understand the plot reasons, but man, I was mad. All right. Okay, so let's talk about some of the plot points and some of the world building that takes place in the stories. The bond bags that the characters have played into this idea of Jaqen going from boyhood to manhood. A lot of the, all three of the stories, all three of the books had this concept of him wanting to become a man, of him becoming a man. And there were there were a few different ways that he saw as paths to manhood. That's how I want to say it. He, for example, one of the predators out there in the wild is called a drac, and a drac will kill a man, and it will kill a dragon, and it will eat dragon hatchlings. It will come after dragon eggs and dragon hatchlings, right? These dracs, they get up into the spica trees, and they make their nests up there, and then they go hunting for dragons. In one of the early scenes in book 1, Jaqen discovers a drac out flying around. He's like, oh my gosh, I need to tell the folks at the nursery there's a drac about. There's probably a nest somewhere. We need to hunt these things down and kill them before they come after the dragons at the nursery, before we let the hens and the hatchlings out, for air and exercise, because the dracs will come and kill them. So this is great that he lets them all know. Lycaern is like pissed that Jaqen is giving information that he couldn't give. And they decide, okay, we got to go on a hunt and kill these things. Well, page 71, hold on, page 71. Jaqen is able to assist in killing the drac. And they see this as a path to manhood. And it says here, let's see. As he left, Karina's voice echoed again in his thoughts. Most men after their first roundup. And he thinks, most men? Was the passage from boy to man really that easy? And was it always built upon lies? Isn't that deep? Isn't that awesome? Because see, he helped kill the drac. He helped in some small way, but he wasn't the one who wielded the blow that killed the drac, right? He wasn't the one. So this idea that he helped kill drac, well, not really, but everyone's giving him credit and he's letting them. So he's kind of sort of lying. He's being deceptive. So he's saying here, was the passage from boy to man really that easy? And was it always built upon lies? I love that line. I underlined it. That's awesome and great. But the other way that he thinks he can become a man is to train a dragon. Another way that he thinks he can become a man is to have his dragon win in the pits. Okay. Another way, let's see. Another way that he thinks you become a man is to be with one of the baggery girls, like a whorehouse, a baggery. Okay. He thinks he can, if you're with a baggery girl, like one of the Bond boys named Slack, he mentions early on in the book that he doesn't think Slack is really a man because he doesn't think he's really been with a baggery girl. Like, well, that's interesting. Okay, so if he goes and he sleeps with a whore, it's going to make him a man. Yeah, all right. Then another way to become a man is to fill your bag with enough gold to get out of bond. And he thinks if he can fill his bag, then he can become a man. There's all these different ways that he sees as a path to manhood. And that theme, those ideas are throughout these books, is him growing up and becoming a man. Now, we have a situation with this bond bag, okay, that I want to bring up and I want to mention because it caught me so off guard. He is constantly messing with that bag. He's constantly touching it when he's worried, when he's upset, when he's concerned, when he's thinking something through. He's fidgeting with that bond bag around his neck. Okay. He's constantly like testing the weight of it, because his gold is in there. This is the gold that's going to buy his freedom, right? It's a big deal. And as I've mentioned to you, all these colloquialisms and sayings, and I mean, just the culture for this society revolves around these bond bags. Well, toward the end of book 2, let me get to the page 304. Aki needs to go around the bend in these mountains to get more berries and mushrooms to feed to Golden, who is injured, and to Jackin and herself. She needs to get more food, and she can't carry them all in like the apron of her dress, right? She needs her own bag, and she asks Jackin for his. She asks him for his bond bag so that she can put berries in it. And yeah, that caught me off guard. And here's the entire scene, okay? And here's how long she has that bag. Okay. She says, "I'll take the time to find us some food," Aki said. "Give me your bag to carry berries in and whatever else I find. With 2 bags, I should be able to get enough for today at least." Jackin put his hand over the soft leather, kneading it with his fingers. His bond bag. He recalled his mother's placing the chain around his neck. "Now you're a bonder," she said, "but you're still a human being. Walk proudly. Let no man really own you. Fill your bag yourself." He pulled the chain over his head and held the bag in his hand. It was much lighter than he expected. He handed it to Aki, and she took it without a word. Then she was gone. That's it. That was the contemplation that he gave to handing over this bond bag that has been around his neck for years. This bond bag that he has touched every time he's had a worry. This bond bag that is supposed to represent him coming into manhood. Okay, it goes on. Jackin rubbed his chest where the bag should have been. It felt strange not to have that lump of leather there. Turning to Golden, he said, "Funny how little things can be big burdens." Golden was about to answer when they heard Aki scream. "Aki, what is it?" Jackin cried out. "Are you all right?" The only answer was another scream. And so he grabs a knife. Golden hands him another knife. He runs around the corner. She's being attacked by a feral dragon, and they fight off this dragon. Heart's Blood comes and helps, and he's injured some more, and fight. They get away from the feral dragon, drops, dies, whatever. Okay. That is how long, though, that she has that bag, because in that fight, she goes around the corner, she's attacked by a feral dragon, and she drops that bag. She drops his bag. Because here on page 310, on 310, so like several pages later, like a day later, this conversation is happening. "I brought back enough in my shirt and my own bag to satisfy us for now, but I can't find your bag, Jackin. I must have lost it fighting the dragon. I had just been holding it, not wearing it around my neck. I feel awful. I know how much it meant to you, but now it's gone." Jackin's hand went instinctively to his chest. He thought he should have felt a great loss. Yeah, the reader thinks that too. He thought he should have felt a great loss, but somehow he only felt relieved. I think I wanted it gone for good, he whispered. Only I couldn't just throw it away. Okay, now that I buy. I get it. I get it. He needed someone else to help him get rid of that thing. I get it. Okay. Well, it's gone for good now, she said. You'll have to find something else to hold on to when you're worried. Did I do that? He asked. Did I really do that? She nodded. Then she stood on tiptoe and kissed him on the cheek. Don't be embarrassed. It was endearing, she laughed. He felt his face burn and he put his hand up to his cheek. Then he grinned. Feeling a tickle in his brain, like an echo of that grin, he looked up. Heart's blood was still circling, a lazy scripting against the clean slate of sky. Jackin called up to her. Keep watch, my worm. Her answer was a blood-red circle against a clear dream sky, a sentinel sign. Okay, so he's gotten rid of his bag now. And just the way it happened, the way it came about was so quick. I just felt like we should have had more. It just feels like there should have been more contemplation. There should have been more, like that should have taken more out of him. Why didn't he care more? Why didn't he think about it more? Why didn't it affect him more? I think it would have affected me more if it was my life. But they are out in the wild now. I mean, if you think about it, he is already a master. He has already bought his way out of bond. He is already a free man, right? So the bag is more symbolic now than anything. So maybe just throwing it away is okay. And he just needed her to help him throw it away. What do you think? Have any of you out there already read this? What do you think? I mean, having her take the bag and just lose it immediately, is that okay? Or is that weird? Maybe it's okay. All right. Next on my list. Let's see. Okay, there was stuff that we don't want to learn in this book because it's sad and it's just sad, but it's stuff that we need to learn so that we have it in our minds for later. And one of those examples is on page 218 when we go to the stews. Okay, I told you we would come back and talk about the stews a little bit. These dragons that they breed, if the dragon is not, like if the hatchling doesn't look like it can become a fighter, and if it's not like beautiful to become like someone's beautiful pet, then they send it to the stews. And that's what we talked about on culling day, right? On culling day, they decide, okay, you look like you're going to be a fighter. Let's go get some training. You look like you're useless. You're going to the stews. And they put these dragons on these tractors, on these wagons, and they drive them to the stews, which is awful. And so at the stews, when Jackin, when he takes Heart's blood to the rock, Sarkhan goes with him, and they have one of the fights, and the dragon that Heart's blood injures is this a different? Yeah, this is a different dragon that gets injured. This is one of Sarkhan's dragons that gets injured, but he's injured in such a way that he can't recover. Like, I think he's like hamstrung is what they call it. He's hamstrung. He won't be able to fight properly again. And so he can either slowly suffocate to death or they can take him to the stews. So they're taking this dragon to the stews. And it's sad. I mean, it's awful. I mean, they go into this pit where hatchlings that have been culled are in wagons and crates, and they're scared and they're sending messages. And because Jackin is very in tune with dragons, he can hear their messages. He can see the colors of their messages. It's scary. Let's see. But we learned something here. Okay, while the blood was flowing, the man turned his head briefly and shouted something to the other green suit by the door, some joke or instruction. Then he turned back, checked the cull's eyes, and smiled. Jackin could see the smile as the man dipped his hand into the vat and wiped a smear of blood into his mouth. How can he do that? Jackin asked, remembering suddenly the steaks Karina served at dinner, smothered in rich red sauce. Sarkhan ignored the real question. Once the dragon's been dead a minute, he said, the blood loses its heat and no longer burns. So what we're seeing here is Jaqen is remembering, okay, when you touch dragon's blood, it burns you. It leaves pox. Remember in the very beginning when we learned about that injury to Jaqen? He was down, he was unconscious, and those drops of blood from brother pocked on his back. He's got 3 scars on his back from dragon's blood, right? Okay. Well, what we've just learned is once the dragon has been dead for a minute, the blood no longer has that property. It no longer has that ability to burn you. The blood is no longer dangerous once the dragon is dead. And that's going to be important later in the book when Heart's blood dies. When she gives her life protecting Jaqen and Aki, she dies and her blood is no longer dangerous to them. So they're able to cut her open. They're able to go inside her egg chamber and sleep there and stay warm there through the dark after. They're able to stay warm there during the dark after because the blood is not dangerous to them anymore. So we learn things even in this awful, terrible, horrible scene. Yeah. Sad scene. Okay, what's next? Next, I wanted to point out an odd morality. And I'm also going to point out how everyone, it seems like, is just doing things to Jaqen. All the other characters are, we're seeing things through Jaqen's point of view, and he's learning stuff. So therefore, we are learning stuff after the fact, right? So let's go to page 108. Hold, please. All right, on page 108, we have what I wrote on the side is odd morality. So let me read that for you first. Aki has just returned from buying some seeds for Jaqen. He's given her some gold. She's bought some seeds so that he can plant some more of the burnwort and the other plant that's real good for the dragons, right? They eat it. He could have stolen what he needed from the nursery stores. Just a handful of seeds seemed an insignificant thing, but he never even considered it, just as he never considered sneaking into the pits. Taking an egg was acceptable thievery, the mark of a possible master. But taking supplies from a nursery might condemn an older dragon to short rations in a bad year. It could even mean death to the nursery worms. And sneaking into the pits meant cutting into the most basic part of Astarian economy. Besides, if he was caught, it was punishable by a prison term on another planet. Jaqen simply would not do such a thing. And I thought that was really odd morality. Like, he won't steal some seeds from the nursery where he works, but he'll steal a freaking dragon from the nursery where he works. That was an odd morality to me. But there you go. I mean, he spells out his justification for it. There you go. But what has happened here, Aki has brought him the seeds that he's asked her to buy. Like, he's given her his own gold to go buy these seeds. He's given her the money to purchase what they need for Heart's blood. She goes to the rock at one point and she gets the paperwork to enter Heart's blood into a minor pit fight. Okay, she gets the paperwork for that. She does the things. It brings it to him. He signs on the dotted line. She's helping him get this stuff put together. Well, it turns out she's very aware that what he's doing is, it's clandestine, right? She's very aware, and she's been watching him this whole time. She's not the only one who's been watching him. Lycaern has been watching him because Sarkhan told Lycaern to watch him. Sarkhan is fully aware. Sarkhan is fully aware that Jaqen has taken this hatchling. He's been aware this whole time. Through this whole first book, he knew this was going on. Everyone who needed to know knew that this oasis existed, that Jaqen thinks is a big secret. Lycaern, Sarkhan, and Aki, they knew about the oasis. They set him up to steal that hatchling. Sarkhan told Lycaern to make the mistake on the log sheet. He said, write down 9 instead of 10. He told him to do that so that they could tempt Jaqen and see if he would steal the hatchling. And he did. And they let him. And they watched him. And they watched to see if he could train this dragon. And yeah, he could. They watched to see if he would steal from the nursery. And no, he didn't. They watched to see how he would behave. And they were pleased with the way he behaved. And they were pleased with the way his dragon performed in the pit. They watched over to see if he would screw up. And he didn't screw up, so they were happy. And they made money off of his dragon winning. It was a little bit frustrating that at any point they could have stopped him. At any point they could have pulled the rug out from under this kid. They let him, keep doing what he was doing. All the time in this first book, we the reader and Jaqen thought he was doing something cool and clandestine and fun, and he thought he was being, I don't know, surreptitious, right? He was winning his freedom. He was going to train this dragon and fill his own bag. Well, he wasn't filling his own bag. His master was filling it for him, letting him think he was filling his own bag. It was weird. It's like he sort of kind of became a man, but only because his master was setting it all up. It was strange. So just a little bit strange. Okay. What else? I want to talk about in book 3. I know I'm jumping all over the place, guys. I'm sorry. I do have notes here. You would think I could be more organized because of the notes, but no. All right. In book 3, in Ascending of Dragons, the reason it's named Ascending of Dragons, or the reason that comes into play, is because the transformation that Jaqen and Aki went through when they were in Heartsblood's body allowed them to send their thoughts. I mean, now they have this ability. They're able to communicate telepathically with one another and with the dragons. They have dragons' eyes. They have dragons' communication abilities, okay? And they see different colors, and they see communication in color. In the very beginning, in the introduction, Jane describes something for us. And let me see if I can. Okay. There is increasing evidence of level 4+ intelligence and a color-coded telepathic mode of communication in the Ostarian dragons. Okay, so they have this, like Heartsblood, she has this red rainbow of color that she uses to communicate with Jaqen. When he sees this flood of red rainbow, it's comforting to him. He knows that she's sending him a message, right? And it's lovely. It's wonderful. Well, after Jaqen and Aki, receive this ability, they're able to communicate with the 5 hatchlings of Heartsblood. They're able to communicate with one another with these colorful thoughts, right? Aki has this like blue, I want to say ribbon of thread, this blue braided thread that comes underneath her thoughts, right? So when he's receiving a message from, out there, and it's got that blue thread, he knows it's a message from Aki, right? Anyway, the 5 dragons, the 5 hatchlings, have their communication with them. And in book 3, when Aki and Jaqen get captured by these ore workers, I was surprised by Jaqen's like almost dismissal of that color's absence. Like he doesn't, hang on, Winston's getting upset. Maybe not. Okay. He almost, he doesn't address the fact that he doesn't hear his dragons when he's in this mountain. There is a moment when he's, whenever he's underwater in one of the lakes inside the mountain, there's a crackle that disrupts the communication between him and Aki, and it also disrupts the communication between him and these ore workers. Okay, their telepathy doesn't work when he's underwater. When he's in the water messes with it. Okay, but it takes a long time for Jaqen to worry about his dragons outside. It just takes a while. And I wrote this down. Let's see, page 401. let's go to page 401. Okay, Jaqen is able to assist one of the dragons who's going to give birth, who's going to lay some eggs. He's able to assist with that. He convinces the leader of these ore workers, his name is Mach. He's able to communicate to Mach that he can assist with this dragon that's going into labor, that should be going into labor. So they are going to the place of the great mothers. They're going to the place where this dragon is hanging out to lay her eggs. Let's see. Jaqen wondered what he would find when they reached the place of great mothers. Would the dragon giving birth be Oracle? He doubted that. She hadn't been obviously pregnant and, in fact, had dragged her tail like a dragon in heat. Besides, it took 4 months for eggs to develop, so there couldn't have been time. But a little fear nagged at him. What did he really know about time inside the caves? It felt like a week or two, but without access to the sun and moons, he couldn't tell day from night, much less the passage of a week. So see, what's happening here is we're seeing that he's not sure about the passage of time. We don't know how long he's been in this cave system. We don't know how long he's been in the mountain. It's been a while. It's been at least, how did you tell us? It's been like 10th. It was the 9th or 10th rotation. He'd lost count somewhere along the way. Okay, so it's been a little while that they've been in this cavern, that they've been captured and separated. Like he's with the guys and she's with the girls. Okay, and been a little while. And so over on page 402, like the next page, it says, if the outer cavern had been a surprise, this room was an astonishment. It held only 3 stalls, but each was as spacious as a room in the nursery incubarn. The first stall was occupied by a greenish-gray dragon, a little smaller than Sasha, placidly munching on something Jaqen didn't immediately recognize. This was the first time since they've been captured that we've mentioned Sasha or Sargon or one of the triplets, okay? The 5 hatchlings that are outside in the world. This is the first time we've mentioned them since we've been captured. This is the first time in this 9 or 10 rotations and however many days and whatever. And it's just a mention of, this dragon was a little smaller than Sasha. Why aren't we constantly thinking of these dragons that we've been in this wonderful, beautiful color communication with? I mean, they've been in each other's minds for months. Why? It just seems very strange to me that absence wasn't more pressing on them in this cavern system. That absence would have touched me, would have hurt me, would have bothered me. And it's not bothering Jaqen. At least we don't see that it's bothering Jaqen right away. Now, when he and Aki get together to work at helping this dragon who is trying to lay some eggs, when they get together and they're helping her, a couple of pages later, Aki mentions the triplets and he's like, oh yeah, the triplets. And so we talk about them and we do miss them. So that conversation happens. So yes, Aki is thinking about them and that's very nice. But boy, it just caught me off guard that we're not thinking about them. We're not worried about them out there on their own, and we're not missing them in that color communication. All right, but this dragon that's having troubles, we see the terrible things that happen with this ore working community and the dragons because of her. And we learned in books 1 and 2 that after a dragon lays her eggs, she needs to rest, right? After that egg laying is a process and it takes a lot out of her, and she needs to rest and she sleeps. And she needs to eat a lot. She needs a lot of food after laying the eggs. And also those, like she can lay 100 eggs, right? But not every one of them is going to have a hatchling in it. The hatchlings, or the eggs that do have hatchlings, she can sense which ones do, and she will go to, after she sleeps for a little while, she will go to the pile of eggs and she will pick through, she will nose them around, and she will separate out the ones that have hatchlings, and she will keep those aside. The ones that do not have hatchlings, the ones that are not viable, those, out in the wild, the feral dragons would lay those extras because like the lizards and the drac would come and eat those. Those are the decoys, right? So those others, the hens will eat those. she consumes those and gets like the protein and the nutrients from those into her. Well, in this society, in these cave dwellers take those away, and this gray greenish dragon doesn't get to consume that protein and those nutrients. And so she is failing. She is weakening. She's becoming sick. And Jaqen and Aki can see this, and they're like, this is not good. She needs more food. And they're trying to communicate that to Mac, the leader. They're trying to let these people know she needs something. And Aki's like, this is not good. I don't think this is, I think something bad is about to happen. And she's right. The ore workers load the dragon up onto a wagon. They take her out to this like bowl where the ceremony is going to happen, and they kill her. They carve her up and put their babies inside her. And yeah, but they weaken her. They let her get weak. And we see her weakening, and we understand that she's weakening because in books 1 and books 2, Jane taught us how it was supposed to work. Jane taught us already that after they lay the eggs, they need to consume the ones that are not viable. They need to eat more food. They need to take this long nap. They need to rest and recover. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying is Jane did a really good job of teaching us. She did a really good job of teaching us about these dragons. She did a very good job of making me care about the dragons. She did an awesome good job of making me want the characters to care more about the dragons. And in fact, at the end, close to the end, we have rescued Oracle. We have rescued one of the hatchlings. We're going out into the wild. We've gotten them through this river and this tunnel, this lake. We've come up through the water, and the dragon is floating along the river because she didn't get out of the water when she was supposed to. She didn't quite understand that part. And her hatchling is on her back, and she goes over a waterfall, and Sasha and Sargon are trying to help her. It's a mess. We're scared. We're worried. The triplets go to help find the hatchling that went over the falls. And Jaqen and Aki are just beside themselves with worry about the hatchling. They're like, oh my gosh, did the hatchling die? And they're not seeing any communication from the triplets. They're not seeing communication from Sargon and Sasha about the hatchling, and they're afraid that the hatchling has died. Oh my gosh. So they climb down the side of this mountain to get to the bottom of the waterfall. And there's the hatchling, happy and cooing and laughing and giggling with the triplets, just having a gay old time, right? And let's see, there were the triplets and Sasha and Sargon and Oracle all standing over the dragonling. Aki screamed, "You didn't tell us! You let us think she was dead!" She ran over and grabbed up the hatchling, who wriggled delightedly in her arms. A splash of chuckles ran through Jaqen's head. No splat, no splat, no splat. Aki turned to him, her eyes full of laughter. Jaqen, don't you see? Proof positive that they're not just animals. Animals couldn't play a practical joke. She nuzzled the hatchling. You guys. It took until page 461 for Aki to decide these dragons are not animals and they're smart and they can play a practical joke. I mean, we've been figuring that out. We've been figuring that out through this whole section through here. And Aki doesn't get it until page 461. I was disappointed in that, but I like the fact that she at least came to her senses and figured it out. And I loved the dragons all playing a practical joke. And I loved the dragons overall. Jane Yolen made me love these dragons, which I think was great for the Dragon Reading Challenge and the Year of the Dragon content here on Sandy Says Read channel. Thumbs up for awesome, cool, amazing, great dragons in the Pit Dragon Trilogy with a glare. There you go. From Jane Yolen. You guys, I can recommend these 3 books because they were good stories. Yeah, I know I said that it was like surface world building, but it was good. And it was what the stories needed. It worked for the stories. Awesome dragons. Awesome dragon building. Awesome dragons. I liked them very much. I thought it was good. I hated the fact that Heart's Blood had to die. I understand why. I get it. It makes sense. I just hate it. I just hate it. Yeah. That's it, you guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed this rambling review. There will be more. There will be more rambling reviews coming up. Thanks so much for tuning in.